Welcome to Narratives Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
There was a leader whom I really respected, and I was concerned about his response after I came out. I was not in the DC area, but I went to DC, and I said, I really need to speak with you and tell you directly before you hear this from others. And this was also a watershed moment for me. I was fearful that he would kick me out of his office. He was a former Marine, one of our most senior officers, had been my boss twice, and including while I was in Afghanistan, he was my external boss. And I walked in, and I can remember I was quivering. And a great big government desk and huge office and all this. And as soon as I walked in, he said, "Hey, it's great to see you." I hadn't seen him in a year because I had been in Afghanistan. And he said, "There's something." He said, "What is it?" And I really couldn't speak. He said, "Let's sit down." So I sat down and I dropped cover with him and I said, "I need you to know this." And he stood up. He really didn't reply verbally. He just stood up, and I thought, oh, great. Here's this 6'5" man standing in front of me, and I'm still sitting down. And he said, "You need to stand up." I thought, oh, here it comes. And he walked over and he hugged me.
Hello, welcome back to Leadership Story Talks. That was Kenny Leahman. Really a wonderful episode all around. I encourage everybody to go and check that out. But the quote that we chose for today to do a deeper dive on is really a wonderful story, first of all, a great moment. He decides to finally, as he says in the episode, drop cover. And that meant coming out to this, former boss and very imposing figure, Marine, etc., and just really didn't know how it was going to land. And the man just decides to say nothing and give him a hug.
Yes.
So yeah, what a moment. So yes, go ahead.
Talk about plot twists. I mean, we enter every podcast waiting to be surprised and informed, but this one, I didn't see half of this coming, and how people in his life presented, how he chose to present, and the assumptions he made during a very important decision he was making to come clean about his background, tell the truth, show that courage. So awesome all the way. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it's so representative of the assumptions and judgments we make before we walk into a room and we're about to meet someone for the first time, or in Kenny's case, someone he knew very well, actually, but he still had assumptions about how it might not go well. And yet he still decides to do it. We still decide to push on, even in the face of those pretty strong assumptions and preconceptions that we have in our minds, with something quite real at stake for him, at a time when coming out in the military was certainly not something that was accepted. And so for him to react the way that he did, as you say, it was a huge plot twist, but I think it's a reminder for all of us to just notice whenever we're in a situation where we're so, I keep going on about values, but it comes back always with our guests of like, when your values are not aligned with your actions. And in Kenny's case, it was lying to his family and keeping that cover up. It just, at one point, it just wasn't tenable anymore. He couldn't live with himself anymore. He had to come out. He had to drop that cover. And I think that happens to many of us, where once we become aware of the fact that we're not aligned with our values and we're taking actions that are really bad for us. Suddenly, you have to stop and say, okay, it's time for me to come out and say what's going on, and to whoever. And that's a real act of courage. And I think, you have to sort of be able to drop the assumptions you have about how that's going to be received. Because in so many cases, it's received the exact opposite way that you thought it would be.
So much here because he was carrying that almost like you were trained to carry your buddy in the battlefield. He was
Mm,
carrying that other piece of him for years and having that burden and fear of ramifications
mm,
when he was operating in undercover as well in his real life. So there was no day off and
yeah.
no break. And I also respect like how he used his voice and cultural skills as he moved away from the work he was doing into civilian life. So I
Yeah.
sat there to anticipate who's going to talk about, well, I did competitive intelligence and I used all this grass. He went into coaching. He went into
Mm,
like using the cultural knowledge he learned about the listening and meeting people where there are, and how his work, as intense as it was built on trust. And
yeah.
really, people are literally putting their lives in his hands when they
Yeah.
build trust. And
Hmm.
if his message was like, if I can do that in the field, you can do that in the boardroom or classroom. That's not such a big leap. It's a little
Yeah.
safer even. So that was a big experience, and just
Hmm.
his personality. I met somebody named Kenny, and I was thinking, not the name I would think about when a CIA operate, but again, the assumptions and the change. People show up in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's true. It's a good way for us to check ourselves as well,
Mm,
our assumption. It's so wonderful. I love it when my assumptions are completely wrong,
long.
and yeah, because it's sort of like, oh wow, that's sort of delightful. There's now I'm learning something new about this person, and once those assumptions go away, you're truly present, right? And there's one more thing I wanted to talk about, which was the leadership style of that Marine who decided to hug Kenny in that
Mm,
moment, and really didn't use many words, but clearly was empathetic enough and compassionate enough to sort of know that that was the thing to do in that moment. Also, based on their relationship of many years of working together. So there was a lot of trust there to begin with. And of course, I'm reminded that it's so natural that you're about to come out with this big secret and you don't know how it's going to be received. But the assumption you're making is a negative one.
mm,
But there's also, when you look at the history of that relationship, I bet Kenny can go back and sort of say, of course, that's the way he reacted. And of
mm,
course, that's the way I should have assumed he was going to react.
mhm.
When you have such a long relationship, working relationship with someone in such a, uh, you know, a, a, in a field in which trust is so important. Clearly, these two people trusted each other for a long, long time. So why would this one moment, this one thing, destroy all of that? Of course, it wouldn't. And the reaction of that man, to just hug him, was clearly exactly what he knew that Kenny needed in that moment.
And we talk about stories bring other stories to mind. And I remember a colleague in college coming out finally, and things were hiding in plain sight. What we had to do is find that bridge to create that moment because it had to come from him to
Mm,
say it. It's a very sensitive issue and personal, so you don't want to be making assumptions or guesses. But finding that moment to build a bridge and be on the other side when that
yeah.
person is sharing, I think
Mm.
was the thing that came to mind. And that leader was there for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. Yeah. And so I would just encourage everyone who's listening
Mhm.
to just notice those moments, because what Kenny decided to share with us, that didn't happen yesterday. It happened a little while ago, but it was clearly something that was really influential in his life, and just the power of that moment. Look at how much we've been able to talk about that moment. And we've only met Kenny once, and we'd never met the man who hugged him. And yet we're getting so much out of that story. So I encourage always everyone to just think about those moments in your own lives, in your own careers, those people who showed up for you, who came up with exactly the right thing to say or the right thing to do, and how that steered you in a certain direction look back at those moments and see where you are now and see how that was all influenced. Because if you can drill it down into that essential moment like Kenny did, that was a quote that lasted less than a minute. It communicates so much. So try to do that for different sections of your life where things mattered, and look at the people who came up and showed up for you. So that's my little pep talk for everybody.
Alrighty.
All right. Well, as always, I want to thank everyone for listening. And if you have any ideas of your own, questions of your own, if you'd like to participate in any of our training programs, whether that's one-on-one or in groups, go to narrative.com, NARATIV.com. You can also look at our archive of podcasts. I really encourage you to go and find Kenny's interview. That's at narrative.com/podcast. And as always, please leave a review wherever you find your podcast. That drives the word of mouth. You can also check out our YouTube channel. Maybe that's where you are right now, to see us in 3 dimensions. And finally, I want to thank you as well, Julienne, for being my wonderful co-host. And I'll see you all next time. Thank you so much.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.